Okay, we're going to go ahead and get things started. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the USDA and ATARC's Artificial Intelligence Data Analytics Virtual Summit. For those of you who don't know, my name is Tom Suter, and I am the ATARC CEO and founder. ATARC, otherwise known as the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, is a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. And we really want to thank USDA for this special event that we're putting on today. We want to thank Caitlin Rundle, Julia Jalonen, Chris Alvarez, Chris Rotler, Justin Ronka, and Ted Kaut for their tremendous help. Special thanks to Gary Washington, for the CIO, for facilitating this. And we'd also like to thank our partners over at Pure Storage and Alteryx. And I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. And we're going to have a keynote. We're going to have some panels. We've got a couple of emerging technologies talks. We think it's going to be a great, informative day. And for me personally, this is really kind of special. I always love working with the USDA. And although it looks like in the background I'm right around 14th and Independence, I had actually started my career out of college, and I worked at 14th and Independence for a couple of years. And then I had the opportunity, I had a company that I had started doing telecommunications work. So we did work at all the headquarters and as well as all the remote offices. And then actually I did some more development work later on the mobile side. So I've kind of sprinkled in a lot of USDA throughout my career, and they just have a tremendous mission. And you're really going to hear today about some of the great work they're doing in regards to the pandemic that you kind of take for granted. You know, it's great that we've all been able to work remote, but there's a lot of frontline workers from the USDA and the Forest Service and these folks. And we're going to hear some really interesting stories about how they've been working to literally provide food on the table for us. So I'm really excited about today, and we had some really fantastic prep calls leading up to this. But we'll get right into it. I'd like to introduce our keynote, Dr. Ted Kaut. Ted serves as the Chief Data Officer at the United States Department of Agriculture. In this role, he is responsible for developing strategies that enable the USDA to fully leverage its data as a strategic asset, improving organizational decision-making and outcomes for citizens. He's also selected as the first chair for the newly formed Federal Chief Data Officer Council due to his expertise and leadership in data analytics. And Ted, if you can come on. There we go. And the mute, I think we're good. You still got it muted. Okay, perfect.
All right.
How are you doing today, Dr. Kaut?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for that great introduction.
Great. Well, looking forward to your presentation.
Great. Do we have the slides up? I do want to thank everyone, and Tom, thank you for that great introduction again. I'll echo my thanks for everyone who's joined, as well as for the organizers, my team, our Assistant Chief Data Officers who supported the development of this conference, as well as our excellent panelists and speakers and ATARC for hosting this. I just want to start by saying that I feel it's a pivotal moment in government regarding our ability to truly leverage our data as a strategic asset. Of course, there's been supporting activities for many, many years, but there have been a number of legislative and policy advancements, technology advancements, and agency trends that I think are poised to create some very significant transformation that you'll hear about over the next day or so. I always like to start with a little bit of history because I think it's important to take account of our history. And at USDA, at least, data has been at the very heart of our mission, going back to 1861 when President Abraham Lincoln proposed in his first address to Congress the establishment of an agricultural statistical bureau. And believe it or not, the USDA's first annual report included as its first objective the collecting, arranging, and publishing of statistical and other useful agricultural information. So fast forwarding to today, where we have more than 24 agencies and departmental functions, we generate and maintain many petabytes of data across hundreds of applications and data stores And we, as many other agencies do, have an opportunity to harness our vast data assets to improve strategic decision-making, our efficient use of resources, maximizing the impact of public-facing programs, and to provide the public and the private industry with access to data that can solve national problems. So I'll talk about a couple of the broader federal trends first. I think the passage of the Evidence Act established key responsibilities and positions to implement each title of the Act. And that really signifies, I think, the recognition about the opportunities we have to better leverage our data. And those are the evaluation officer, the statistical official, and the chief data officer. And this is all additive, of course. I mentioned that long history of work on government data, but it does provide some additional focus. I think it's important that we keep in mind that it is a team sport. We have collaborations with those officials, as well as with the other existing positions, privacy officers, agency leadership, data scientists, analysts, data stewards, consumers of our data, both internally and externally, and our industry partners. I think we should also highlight the work of the Federal Data Strategy Team, which creates for the first time a common roadmap and actionable plan for the federal government on the steps that we can be taking. It was published in FY20 and its guidance for the next 10 years with annual action plans that help agencies focus and prioritize. So it's true, the 2020 action plan, it outlines some very aggressive actions and milestones, but they're really foundational, establishing data governance boards, assessing our infrastructure, assessing our workforce, and developing strategies to close those gaps, and inventorying our vast data assets. I'll go on to the next slide here, but just closing out with the overall the action plan for 2020, there's been a lot of success as well. If you want to check out the progress on the data strategy, you can go to strategy.data.gov/progress. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight as well on the next slide is the requirement that we have a federal chief data officer council. That's one of the community actions from the FY20 data strategy action plan. And our vision for this group, as agency CDOs have been established at over 80 agencies across government, is to really lead some transformational change to improve our nation's ability to leverage data as strategic asset. We want to share our collective knowledge to advance the data strategies of individual agencies, but we're also identifying cost-cutting opportunities. And so it includes all of those CDOs. And on the next slide, you'll see what our real areas of focus are. Really looking at how we can establish those government-wide best practices for data, promoting data sharing, looking at how we can use data to improve the production of evidence, and then making sure that we have robust and public engagement with the private users of government data as well as other stakeholders. And so, we've really had some really good work happening with this council over the first few months of its operation. On the next slide, you'll see a couple of those areas of focus. I think as we'll hear later today from some of the work at USDA, COVID-19 has been a real game changer in terms of the demand for data, the need for data, and really highlighted some of our opportunities and challenges as we're seeking to make sure that decision makers have the data that they need and that the public has the data it needs to make decisions about public safety and continuity of operations. So one of the areas that the CDO Council focused on initially was on COVID-19 data, establishing a working group to help answer agency questions. We also honed in on a focus of providing agencies with the data necessary to evaluate risk and continuity of operations. And we were able to create both domestic and international dashboards and to be able to share them, while also highlighting, I think, some of the challenges that'll be something we'll be working on in the next year to actually look at how do we handle the need for business intelligence tools that need to be scaled not only across all of the agencies at USDA, but more broadly across the federal government. So looking forward to continuing that. Of course, we're also focused on sharing our best practices for the implementation of the federal data strategy as agencies are working to implement all of those very aggressive actions, and want to make sure that we're leveraging all of the great work that's happening, elevating it and sharing it so that we're not reinventing the wheel as we go along. There's a heavy focus on data skills, both at individual agencies and at the broader council. So we're working to do things like enhancing the data skills catalog that was released this year, developing roadmaps and playbooks and toolkits for agencies on their data skills strategies, and we're really looking forward to digging into that topic over the next few years. Another area that I mentioned was data sharing. So we also have a working group on data sharing where we're looking at the various use cases that happen across government, and really in a comprehensive way documenting the best practices and challenges, whether those be legislative, whether those be challenges within agencies, and looking to resolve them and to really develop some opportunities for the future. Similarly, focused on inventories and leveraging our collective knowledge there. So those are some of our key areas of focus. Definitely in FY21, we're going to be honing in on those, and you'll see some more communication and deliverables from the council itself as we go forward. So moving on to USDA focus, we'll go to the next slide. One of the things I would highlight before I dive into USDA specifically is a couple of the key trends that we're seeing. USDA, we'll talk a lot today and over the next couple of days about the opportunities for leveraging analytics and artificial intelligence that improve our organizational performance, efficiency, and customer service. And we're going to get to hear a lot about how USDA has done that from an enterprise perspective in a moment. But I will highlight maybe one or two other trends that I'm seeing. I think one of them has to do with the proliferation of available data from new sources. I think that's true in COVID-19. It's also true more generally as those data are needed for harnessing them to support our analytics and integration, and it's creating opportunities and challenges about how we ingest and process and manage those new data sources. So one I would highlight is from the Department of Transportation, for example, where they have a safety data initiative where they have ingested data from Waze. So they're using it to, with integration and analytics and visualization. This crowdsourced roadway event data is working to estimate the number, pattern, and severity of roadway crashes in order to reduce them. And I think that is just a general trend that we're seeing is the proliferation of these data sources and agencies looking at how they can harness them and integrate them into their existing environment. The final one I would highlight briefly is on the focus on the customer, data that can support analysis of our customers in a very robust way. I would highlight, for example, Veterans Affairs, where they look at something called moments that matter in the life of a veteran, whether that's the time that they're serving and separating from the military, living as a civilian over the course of their working life, or also in retirement and aging. How are they doing this longitudinal analysis to support optimizing lifetime outcomes, whether that's health span, their economic outcomes, or dignity as measured by social connectedness. So I think those are three of the key trends that we're seeing as we think not only about compliance with the federal data strategy, but how are we adding value for our agencies as well as for our customers. So definitely we're very excited about the work that's happening at USDA. We feel we've made some significant progress on our own implementation of the federal data strategy. A big part of our initial thrust was really focused on taking a business-driven approach, working with our agency leadership to answer their questions. And much of those outputs took the form of dashboards that have been deployed to leaders and employees across USDA. Those dashboards have enabled us to reduce manual data calls and really enabled us also during COVID-19 to ingest data that was from HHS that was important for understanding our continuity of operations and broader impacts to the food supply chain. So our ability to create those products, but also to integrate data from across all of our missionaries and agencies onto a common platform and to be able to share those products broadly at scale, I think has been one of the game changers for us over this year. So I'll just give a couple of examples. I think, the kinds of things that we're seeing is at the mission area level, state conservationists in FPAC having access to a real-time scorecard with over a dozen key metrics that looks at their program outcomes and enables them to manage their programs more efficiently. Forest supervisors in the forest having an integrated view of their key metrics, whether that's timber sales or fuels treatments or budget and HR, all in kind of a one-stop shop. Similar kinds of dashboards available in the Office of Food Safety. So public health indicators where we have food processing establishments that they regulate across the country. And that's really been an important part of our work for the past 2-3 years, is providing those solutions to leaders, building out our capability to create them, and then creating the common platform that can enable us to do this at scale. So we'll continue to see that effort, but it's broadening into a larger strategy that I'll highlight for a couple minutes on the next slide. Right, so mentioned a lot of those common actions that agencies are taking. A number of them are captured by our high-level goals for our FY 21 through 23 data strategy. We feel it's very important now that we've begun an enterprise approach to data that we have good governance around that data, that we have leaders in place to enable a strategic approach to our analytics development, integration of data, and data sharing more broadly. And so we've established Assistant Chief Data Officer positions and a governance board, and I'll talk in a moment about that. We're really also now honing in on our broader our data analytics workforce, but also our broader data literacy and skills that are needed by employees who are analyzing data and also consuming the data products of others that are proliferating across the environment. We've seen a real benefit, as I said, on having common tool sets that when we create a product can be shared very broadly. So we have a focus on assessing this year our underlying infrastructure and tool sets, and over the next few years, moving toward common analytics platforms that enable us to, again, share data and really remove technology as an obstacle to our broader data sharing efforts, which also supports through better data stewardship and data standards and consistent approaches our open data efforts, both for sharing data internally and externally. On our next slide, I wanted just to highlight, this is probably maybe a little bit hard to read, but it's probably the slide that closest approaches the slide-ment, so maybe we won't stay here too long. But as with other agencies, we're establishing and have established a data governance board. And so we have representation from each and every one of our mission areas that are looking at how we set and enforce priorities for managing our data as a strategic asset, identifying our key challenges, and resourcing those solutions. So our chief operating officers, as well as our statistical official and evaluation officer, are our partners on that board. And we also have established leadership in each of our mission areas, assistant chief data officers in our very significant mission area organizations who are responsible for managing data governance at that level, overseeing lifecycle data management, analytics that is cross-cutting, but also enabling the program areas and analysts with common tools. And so this is the first time we've taken this approach, but they've really proven to be a very valuable asset this year. They, in fact, organized this conference through our analytics COP. They have been working and have established our workforce assessment. And so partnering together, I think we found that there's a real opportunity for us to work together on all of the things that are required so that we share the load and we share those best practices similar to what we're doing also at the federal level. So looking forward to that work. Just to highlight the role of the Assistant Chief Data Officer, this is one of the early changes that we've made at USDA in terms of function and the need to support leveraging our data as a strategic asset. On the next slide, we have established those positions as a consistent position, and you'll hear from a couple of them today, including Jim Barham from Rural Development and Cindy Parr from our remission area. I think this slide is actually representative of what Jim is doing specifically in his mission area in rural development, but it's also exemplary of the kind of approach we're taking across the department. And that's really managing a centralized analytics team that's looking at those cross-cutting data challenges, building out the workforce within the mission area, enabling the program areas, as I've said, gamifying and really making the data visualization efforts and the tools that are available fun, and training employees across the department on adoption of dashboards and making sure that that's well communicated. And then, as I said, standing up their own mission area data governance boards and strategies that are aligned with the departmental vision. So we're really excited about that change and how that's going to help us to build to a consistent model across the department. We'll go to the next slide. So I mentioned that agencies across government are conducting a data skills workforce assessment. Obviously, we've done a lot of training to get to where we are over the past couple of years on things like data visualization. I mentioned that we've established those key leadership positions and centralized analytics teams, and we're going to continue to build on that. But we are really interested in the broader needs that these kinds of changes have on the skill sets that are needed. So as we reduce data calls and we make tools and data more available, what opportunities do we have for staff to focus on higher value activities, analyzing data, of course, doing the data science work and the analytics work that you'll hear about today, but also just being able to consume the data. What are those skills that are needed across the department? So we're in the process of conducting that assessment. It'll be completed in the next week or two, and that's really going to provide a first picture of, from a supervisor's perspective, what our broader needs are across the department. So of course, we'll be sharing the work that we're doing here with other agencies, and we'll use this as a baseline for improvement over the next few years. Next slide. And I would be remiss if we did not talk at our analytics conference today, where we're going to hear from some really excellent speakers who are part of our leadership, but also part of our communities of practice across the department. We have established two communities. They meet every other month, and there is some overlap between them, but they're also somewhat distinct. We have a data visualization community of practice where we're focused on adoption of data visualization tools and building a culture that values the use of that data. We share success stories. We share new ways of visualizing data, and just have a great conversation about being excited about using the tools and creating them and promoting them. And then we have an advanced analytics COP, which is actually worked to along with my team to set up the conference for today. So again, want to thank them, and in particular Justin Ronka from FSIS, as well as Chris Rottler from FNCS, who are Assistant Chief Data Officers there, and they help to lead the advanced analytics community of practice. And so every other month, they're also doing things like we're doing at the conference over the next day or two to showcase the great work that's happening with practitioners. And we really want to create this as a robust community that has an opportunity to learn and again, not to recreate the wheel, but to share best practices and to be supportive. So I think with that, I think that provides hopefully a good overview of some of the trends happening across government and the work that we have ongoing at USDA. And again, really excited to hear from the panelists and from the speakers, and I'll turn it back over to you, Tom. Thank you.
No problem, Ted. Thank you so much for that. And it's great how you've leveraged all that work you're doing in the CDO Council and turning it around and using it in your own agency. And I'm sure some of the other agencies are doing the exact same thing. So thank you very much for that. That was a great way to kick this thing off. Thank you. Okay, next up, we are off to a good start. Thank you, Ted, again. We also are going to, we have some industry partners that do these lightning tech talks, and it's really informative. I will say that this doesn't imply endorsement by the USDA, but we feel like bringing in industry in to offer their perspectives that they see across government is very valuable, especially to our government attendees. So next up, we are going to have Seth Kinley, a principal system engineer, is going to present on modernization tools and tactics. And he is with a good partner of ours called Pure Storage. How are you doing today, Seth?
Doing well, Tom. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Are you like on a space station somewhere with that backdrop? It seems like the good. No.
No, it's been far too long since we were in the office. This is actually one of the lobbies out in Mountain View, so I'm hearkening back to the old days.
That's fantastic. Well, I look forward to your talk. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead and get my presentation up here and we'll get going. So thank you so much for having me, Ted. That was absolutely spectacular opening. And we're going to take a couple 6-7 minutes to go through just, as Tom said, a lightning round for what Pure Storage does. Pure Storage is an all-flash vendor in the storage space, doing data as a service and allowing people to be cloud ready and cloud focused. And as Ted sort of outlined and alluded to, there are a number of challenges in today's enterprise. That would be traditional silos, the monoliths, right, where you have to have an SME that's interacting with it. Somebody has to be on site, which is not conducive in a pandemic. Complexity or esoteric designs where it's set up and you don't want to touch it because you're afraid of breaking it. Things that cost a lot of money to manage, right? We all have that one application or program, system, or data set that costs too much money. And then looking to bring it forward, making it sort of cloud portable, right, or containerized. Things that sound like marketing, right? But it's the wave of the future. Performance has always been a challenge, and that's what Pure was sort of founded on about 10 years ago, was taking performance out of the equation. Make everything as fast as it has to be all the time for any workload. And then the 3 to 5 year replacement cycles, right? Do we forklift data? Can we do it non-disruptively? Am I gonna miss my kid's soccer game? Why would they have to do it over Christmas, right? All of those things that are super complex. And we came to the market with a sort of broad idea, right? Can this all be fixed? And we really distilled it down into 4 areas that we think we can help address across every sort of enterprise and every vertical and bring the modern data experience, right? And those 4 pillars are that fast matters. Data has not gotten any slower and it won't get any slower. Time to results are much, much quicker, especially if you're running real-time analytics for bad people doing bad things or for trying to anticipate whether a fire might might cross over a fire break. We have to have the data immediately. It has to be infallible and it has to be super fast. The next pillar would be cloud everywhere. And cloud everywhere just means an API-driven platform that allows automation and orchestration for tools that maybe one vendor can't share, an open ecosystem that allows you to talk to what you have now and what you might build into the future. And the third pillar would be simple as smart. Those 2 other pillars, they could be seen as being very hard, right? Getting to the cloud is a hard process and progress is minimal sometimes. But if you can make it simple by having the storage do things based off heuristic data that's been defined from tens of thousands of other users, you don't have to build your own, right? You can borrow from somebody like in academia. If you can't top them, borrow from them and go out strong, right? So simple is smart. We've built most of the playbooks for you. And then as far as a subscription to innovation goes, you don't have to worry about, forklifts or how am I going to move forward in the future. Through the Evergreen program with Pure Storage, you simply re-up your maintenance for a predetermined period of time, 1 to 3, sometimes even 5 years, and your hardware is going to be upgraded along the way. On the 3rd year, you're going to get a new set of controllers, a new piece of hardware to ensure that it's modern. The entire time the data stays in place, there's no forklift, there's no migration, it stays on the disks and we change things in the back end, which allows it to be simpler for you, faster time to getting it done, and you don't miss those nights and weekends. But what does this really mean, right? That's a lot that we've talked about in a very short time, and we'd be happy to have further conversations. But what it really, really boils down to in the real world is absolute jaw-dropping impacts. And we have a quote here from Jim Dolan, who is the HPC manager for Ion Geophysical, and you can see that 50 racks of, we'll say, legacy hardware can be replaced with one 4RU device that will serve multiple protocols from SMB, NFS, S3, right, and is cloud ready, or it can help you on-prem. It gives you the sort of real world impact to save on both power, cooling, footprint, right, data center consolidation, and security, as well as sort of power and cooling memorandums, right? All the things that are coming in the new, sort of the new wave that say, shrink your footprint, increase your ability to do work, do more with less, right? It was a paradigm that we didn't think was capable of being achieved before, but Pure has managed to do it through smarter hardware, better services, and a unique approach. So that was a physical sort of example. And then here's some places where you can certainly go and look at purestorage.com/customers. You can look in verticals across government, across regulated industry. So that would be, federal healthcare, right? Veterans Administration, for instance. And you can look up and cross correlate all of the memorandums and statutory sort of regulations that are put out to say that, is it secure while it's fast? And the answer is yes, right? You don't have to take it from us. You can listen to people like AMG Petronas for the racing fans out there, or Man AHL for the people that do investments. And everybody uses ServiceNow more likely than not. And ServiceNow is a big sort of proponent and champion of Pure, right? We took their business and we gave them those 4 pillars of the modern data experience and really allowed them to do more with less. And then I'll leave you guys with this. I know we're probably close to time, but I'll leave you with the fact that we're looking to the future. As Ted said, it's not a now endeavor, it's the next 3 to 5 years. And you have to take bets on what is going to become the ubiquitous sort of technology. And we're thinking that automation and orchestration of containers and containerization will be basically what that is. So in September, Pure and Portworx teamed up together, and we now have the leading Kubernetes data service platform for your cloud native applications and microservices. And please look us up in the booth or reach out to your contacts. And Tom, I'll throw it back over to you to try and get us back close to time.
No, we're doing a good job. Thank you, Seth, for that. And I think that we all know with all this new applications coming up and we need faster and faster. And I look at it as digital transformation, where we're not going to go to the offices as much anymore. And we need to have a better digital experience to reach our constituents. I think that very timely that that you came here today and talk about that. That's something you've got to be thinking about. Thank you very much for that, Seth.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Okay. Thank you. Now we are going to go into our first panel. And if all my panelists can kind of come on live, audio, video, we'll get the show started there. Okay. And we got Mark. I think we're waiting on Mark.
My audio is stopped at your end, so I can't turn it on.
Yeah, we can hear you. You want to put on your video over there? There you go. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. We got everybody here today. So just real quick introductions, and then we'll kick things off. But we have with us today, and this Hollywood Squares, I don't know where you are in relation. So everybody has kind of a different view. So I learned that a long time ago. But we have with us James Barham, who's Acting Assistant Chief Data Officer, Division Director, Data Analytics Division, Innovation Center, Rural Development, United States Department of Agriculture. Welcome, Jim. Yep, and where are you out of today?
Northern Virginia, just like you.
Okay, good stuff, good stuff. Next we have Mark Dembali, Deputy Director, Food Economics Data for Food Economics Data, Research, Education, and Economics for the Economic Research Service, United States Department of Agriculture. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your introduction.
Yeah, you look like you're a chess guy. I see a knight back there. Where are you out of today?
I am in Vienna, Virginia.
Okay, so we got a Northern Virginia flavor.
Right.
And last but certainly not least, we have Chris Alvarez, who's the Deputy CIO out of the Office of the Chief Information Officer, United States Department of Agriculture. And Chris was one of the main proponents to pull this together. So we appreciate that, Chris. And of course, I have to ask you the obligatory question. Are you out of Northern Virginia too? I forget.
No, I'm in the Rockville, Maryland area.
Okay. Okay. Well, we got Washington D.C. surrounded between the four of us. Good stuff. So maybe we'll kick things off with you, Mark, and talk about a little bit about what the work that you've been doing. And you've been rather busy here, I guess, the last 9 months or so. Thank you.
Yes, we have, certainly. And thank you for your introduction, and Thanks for organizers to invite me, participants to join this panel. My assignment today is to talk about ERS, Economic Research Service, work on pandemic's impact on food spending, food prices, and food sufficiency. I do have 7 slides that I want to present in 5 minutes. And so I'm going to be sailing right through it. We can always come back as people see and dig into it further if that's okay. So can everybody see this?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Let me just start out quickly by the disclaimer that this is really a preliminary work, although it's supported by the department, and it hasn't been formally disseminated. So whatever I say should not be attributed to any agency determination or any policy. And I'm going to talk about some analysis using proprietary data from Information Resources, Inc., and none of that should be attributed to IRI either. So with that, let me just say what ERS, or the mission of Economic Research Service, is. And so I want to page down, which I can't. There you go. So ERS's mission, ERS is really the research, the social science research arm of the department. And our job is to anticipate trends and emerging issues in agriculture, food, and environment, and rural America, to do high quality research and put the results on our websites, publish it to inform and enhance public and private decision making. Obviously, when we do this analysis, we're going to need data, and the data, if it exists, fine, we will use it. If it's not, we will use innovative ways of creating it. And we'll get to that in a minute. So when it comes to pandemic impact on food spending prices and food sufficiency, you all know that food at home expenditures increased in response to the pandemic. Food away from home expenditures dropped. Many people basically stocked up non-perishable grocery stores to reduce potential exposure to the virus or perceived shortages. And food insufficiency and hardship increased, as you've witnessed with long lines of food banks. So how do we get our arms around this? When it comes to food expenditures, we use the very reputable Federal Reserve or Federal Census data, actually. Some of it from Federal Reserve, but most of it from Census. And we create a very comprehensive measure of total value of food, whether from household, businesses, government, other institutions. And it covers food at home as well as food away from home from all resources, including whatever households grow or cost. So there's some imputations involved in this. So what do we see there? Here in February, right here, is when the COVID was announced, and come March, we essentially get the impact. And what you see is a major increase. The blue line is the food at home, and the red line is food away from home, and the scale is in billions. The up top is the total line. The total food expenditure drops from 133 to 105 from March to April. From February to March, you see the food away from home jump. Food at home dropped by about 20%. Food at home jumps by 25%. But the red bar, food away from home, has basically turned around and is coming back to where it used to be. And food at home is basically coming down some, but elevated relative to 2019. So using these kinds of data, because they're high quality, it takes time to produce it. They're monthly. There's a 2 months lag. So what you see here is the most recent data. It's kind of like driving today with road conditions in your mind from 2 months ago. That can't happen. So what you want to do in situations like this, you want a high frequency real-time data. So what we did was we went to the industry or the public proprietors, private provider of these data, Information Resources Inc., and we got weekly data from them. These are 2 weeks old data. And what I have here is percent change in total food at home expenditures relative to the same week about a year ago. The scale is percentages. Up until March, you can see that relative to last year, you're just zeroing. Let me just back up here. The blue line is dollar amounts of what people have spent. The red line, the orange line, is what is called the volume equivalent. In other words, because packages come in different sizes, equivalized volume. So what you see that in March, both the volume and the dollar amounts is jumping up to about 60%, coming down. It has stayed at around 10%. Let me just say here that anytime you see a gap between the blue line, which is the dollar amount, and the orange line, that is an indication that prices are increasing. And in fact, prices have increased up until this ladder, and prices are relative to about a year ago. They're month to month aren't changing that much. The same thing happens. You can take this data. They're much richer than government data. They're much richer, and you can break it down by the type of food, and the same story holds here. This is again percent change relative to November 2019 of last year. These are all November data. And I think November up to November 1st data. And what you see is that these dollar amounts have jumped up, and they are all positive, ranging from 6 to about 18%, alcohol 16%. The same story holds for other variables. So for food prices, we rely on BLS. And this again shows you the percent change relative to October of last year. Fortunately, these data are about they're monthly data, and they're about a month lag to them. So these are October over October changes. And you can see over here how the prices have changed relative to last year across various commodities. We are doing the same thing here. For high frequency real-time data, we have relied on IRI. We are using the very, very extensive at the item level prices, and we are creating some weights to develop weekly prices at the back end. Finally, comes the food insufficiency, and this is an effort that ERS, Census, and 6 other agencies got together, developed an experimental survey right in March, immediately in March, and we got on the scene and started collecting the data weekly. This is online survey of 100,000 people. And the questions cut across the mission area for all those 6 agencies. We can dig into what we have there, but this is an interesting statistics that we gathered. It's about the food sufficiency, very low food sufficiency, or low food sufficiency, and I've given the definition here. What you can see relative to December is that there's a big jump, 3.7% to 9.7 to 9.5. It stayed elevated, and as I think the businesses opened up and people got employed, you can see that this is declining and is coming back to 9.6. So with that, I'm sorry, maybe I took too long. Thank you, and we can dig in and answer any questions you have. Let me take this off.
No problem. That was, where do you get started with that presentation? Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and move over to James Barham, and then we'll kind of hold the questions after everybody had a chance to speak, but I've already seen some in the chat, and please queue them up. We won't let anybody off the hook without asking a few questions. James?
Yeah, thanks a lot. And thank you to invite me today to be part of this panel. Mark, there's a lot to unpack there. So I probably have a few questions too that I'd love to dig into. So as I was introduced, I work at Rural Development. I am the Assistant Chief Data Officer, and I also run a division, a data analytics division. Ted had mentioned in his keynote some of the work that we are doing, and my role, both as a Chief Data Officer, but also even having a centralized data analytics team, is very new to rural development. And I'll spend a few minutes going into that. So this is going to be a little higher level than Mark presented, but I think one of the key things to mention about RD is that while I am part of a research group within rural development, our primary focus, right, is program delivery. And there's a lot of USDA folks on this call, I know. But for the benefit of those outside of USDA, but even for our USDA colleagues, I wanted to just step back and talk a little bit about the scale and scope of RD, right? First and foremost, we are a lender, right? When we are one of the largest banks in the country. In fact, we're the 13th largest bank in the country with over $250 billion in assets. It's a lot. And we're certainly one of the key lenders in rural areas and one of the primary lenders in rural areas. We have a staff of over 4,000 people that are all across the country, every state, and many of the counties across the country servicing our rural customers. But we're not just a lender, right? We're rural development, we're part of USDA, we have a social mission, and that mission is to facilitate rural prosperity and economic development. So in some ways, the best way to explain what rural development is we are the World Bank for rural America. We touch literally every single life in rural America through our housing programs, through our utility programs, and through our business programs. It's worth mentioning, of course, when Seth talked about fast matters, connectivity in rural areas is absolutely vital. And we're seeing that even more so, of course, during the pandemic. Through our telehealth programs, through our broadband connectivity programs, we are really embarking on what happened in the 50s in terms of electrification and trying to bring rural America up to speed as it should be with the rest of the world, or rest of the country, that is. So again, looking at my particular office, we were just 2 years ago just a staff of 3 at Rural Development, not a whole lot of folks, but there was a desire, there was a need, and our agency prioritized developing a centralized data analytics team because we have this massive portfolio that I've talked about, $250 billion in assets spread across housing, utilities, and business, but yet no centralized unit that could actually look across that mission area, right? Everyone was siloed, but yet we know that there's a lot of interactions and interconnections between, say, a housing loan and what might be with that business, and if that business needs a water loan and so forth and so on. So we were put together with really 2 key components, one being around program performance, and that is everything just like understanding the efficiency of our portfolio, how well are we getting the loans out the door, and then also program evaluation. And that aligns a lot with what ERS has been doing in the past, which is what kind of impact are we actually having in our programs? It's quite frankly, it's a question we've had a really difficult time answering at rural development. We're putting over $50 billion of investments in rural communities on an annual basis, but it doesn't matter, right? And so that's another key function. The pandemic has really brought this, these 2 groups, right? I've got a kind of a suite of economists that are doing this longer term evaluation, impact analysis work, and then a suite of data scientists that are running the daily numbers on delinquencies and portfolio performance. But we've had to merge these 2 teams like we've never done before under the pandemic for the need to be able to understand on the ground impacts in rural communities and how it affects our portfolio. If our portfolio dives, our rural community, our rural customers go down too, right? And so do these communities. So it's absolutely vital that we have that real-time daily data to be able to really get to, when you say what are the key challenges of the pandemic, somehow get ahead of it, right? So I think it's worth mentioning before I go a little bit more into one of the data analytic tools we've developed is that there is a suite of tools that we are using at rural development to fight the pandemic. We have what we call servicing action authorities, existing authorities as well as new authorities under the CARES Act to provide financial relief to our customers, whether it's you're a borrower of a loan for housing or a $30 million loan for an electric co-op. We're providing things like, deferrals, moratoriums, loan restructuring, all of these things in order to ultimately provide as much relief as we can to rural communities as they go through this thing. And we know right now that we hit an inflection point. And I know Mark's data stops at September, right? But that was the inflection point in rural America, when in fact, the number of cases per 100,000 started to rise rapidly and have not stopped in rural America, and they have overtaken our metropolitan areas as really the hot spot of COVID. So even more than ever, we're now faced with this challenge of how do we get ahead of it. And so one of the things that we have done as a group is, of course, we scoured the internet looking at all the different resources that are available. We didn't want to be redundant, but what the two key pieces of information that we have is we have our own financial data, and be able to harness that financial data to be able to tell us what kind of insights can it tell us about the vulnerability of certain communities and the impact that the pandemic is having. So we have developed what we call a COVID risk portfolio dashboard, and it's taking key indicators, 5 key indicators. Some of them are economic, and we can go into maybe when we talk some more, I'll go into more detail about it. But it's taking our financial data with economic characteristics of county level data in order to make determinations on the most vulnerable counties to our portfolio. And then be able to harness that information to support our field staff, our loan specialists and our grant specialists and others to be able to say, hey, even if they aren't coming to you for a servicing action or a deferral or talking to you about issues, being able to make the repayment, maybe there's things we can do now, be more proactive as opposed to reactive to this. So I'll stop there because I know I want to give Chris the floor as well as the time for questions. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. It just serves with both of you gentlemen that have spoken so far is like how disparate your mission is and how many things that you influence as one agency. It's like amazing. And Chris, here you are. I know you're the associate CDO. You've got to support all these different missions and kind of come up with some common tools and help them out. Thank you for coming today. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, and thanks everyone for joining today. Really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I think in my role as the Deputy Chief Data Officer here at USDA, I'm in a position where I can get to work across these mission areas and help bridge gaps. We've heard about work that's being done by Mark occurring in our research and economics mission area. We've heard from Jim where in rural development there's an important focus on delivery of programs. At the department level, we're looking at how we can enable that better across all of our mission areas. We have a pretty big organization here at USDA, 8 mission areas, 100,000 employees working to deliver programs and services to every American in the United States. And so that's a really big mission and a really challenging one. We've heard, having worked under Ted, you've heard a lot already about some of the work that's happening at my level, particularly around data governance and bringing our ACDOs together to really help manage data as an asset for the organization. But I think one area that I'll maybe dive into a bit more that I think has been really foundational for our ability to do analytics at the department level and at the missionary level, but also to help us respond to urgent needs such as the pandemic and COVID-19. And that's our enterprise analytics platform. It's something that we stood up. We recognized a need a couple years ago, back in 2018, maybe early 2018, late 2017, that we really had a need within USDA to bring our analytics capabilities together into a common environment, a shared resource that starts to break down some of the silos that have been barriers to accessing data, to leadership getting insights to information, to our workforce from all levels of the organization having access to the same pieces of data. I've seen examples where leadership is seeing one measure around a program, and the field is seeing a different measure. And that is a barrier to communication. It's a barrier to working towards common goals. And so an enterprise solution helps to really resolve that. We've built this platform. We've brought in hundreds of data sets, many of them from within USDA, from our different mission areas. We've brought in data from outside of the organization. Just in terms of COVID in particular, early on, we worked with data coming from Johns Hopkins University to really understand the illness case data that was being measured from there, and a couple of other sources. Ultimately, as we were working to adopt some of the federal reopening standards put out by the White House, really started to benefit from take advantage of the data that HHS was sharing, which was really important data to help us manage our facilities and our workforce, and also to collaborate across USDA as a whole. Just as that one example, we were able to bring in that data set, put it into our shared environment, and then make it broadly available to our missionaries so that they could start to build some of the downstream data products that they need to do. I think that's really important because, again, seen examples where you give people a common data set and maybe some standards in terms of how to measure or calculate information off of that, and they'll still maybe interpret that a bit differently, come to different answers. So at the department level, we're working to solve those kinds of issues and reduce that burden on the missionaries to interpret things themselves. So we bring in, for example, the HHS data. We're applying some of the reopening criteria and giving that to our missionaries so that they can make decisions. How is that being applied? When I think about USDA, we have, I mentioned a pretty big workforce, but we have a pretty big footprint across the country too. Literally thousands of facilities across the country. We have a presence in many, many counties in all of the states in the US. A lot of them have been affected, pretty much all of them have been affected by COVID and the pandemic. Facilities are closing down, folks are working from home where they can, where they can't, and we have a significant workforce that does have to be out and working in the field. We have inspectors that inspect our food supply, and they cannot do that from home. They have to be out at those facilities, or the production of meat and poultry, for example, is impacted by that. How do we give our managers and our supervisors the information they need to be able to make decisions? Overlaying this COVID data with our workforce and our facility location information really helped our management assess situations at a very regional, local level and be able to make decisions about what best to do with facilities and resources. Just to give you one example of how that's had impact, Ted mentioned that we have been building a series of dashboards, and up until we built some of our COVID products, we had been gaining more and more adoption, but had reached about 40,000 views of our dashboards in any given month, about 1,500 people in any given month logging in and looking at our data, USDA folks who are accessing our data products using our Tableau dashboards. We released some COVID-related products, and within a month that doubled to nearly 90,000, well, more than doubled to 90,000 views. Our user base went up to about 4,000 folks accessing our data products. So providing data, that was really, I think to me, that's an example of how important data is to decision-making, to responding to important issues like a pandemic and other crises or other priority issues as well. I think I'll pause there. I know
that's
probably a lot of questions.
that was fantastic. It's just amazing how many more people are, you actually built it and they actually came. So that was impressive. And maybe I can ask you a question, and I've got some queued up for the rest of you all, but maybe I can direct this to you because somebody asked a good question. I don't attribute who asked the question, but I think it was meant for Ted, but I'm going to give it to you, Chris. Due to your efforts, what decisions have you been able to make that you couldn't have been able to make previously, and what types of decisions would you like to be making in the future? And we can open it up to the rest of the panel. You want to take that, Chris, to start us off?
Yeah, I'll start, but I think there's probably a lot of examples, and Jim and Mark may have some that they want to provide too. Certainly, I think one example that's relevant to our platform that I was just referring to was how to manage our workforce. So everyone who was working from home, ultimately we have to be able to make decisions about when to reopen facilities, when to return to work. Clearly, I think right now the situation has changed a bit, and I think a lot of those activities have paused. But we were at a point where things were looking better. We thought that facilities might be in a state where they could open at least at some limited capacity level. So we were able to build dashboards that really showed what the COVID situation was and how that might be impacted. It helps make decisions about should we open a facility or not. If we do open it, where are people coming from, and is the county they're coming from appropriate for them to be returned to work or not? And so that was, I think, one example where we've been able to make decisions. I would say another one, a lot of it is on the program delivery side. A lot of our agencies have had to implement or adjust to implement new programs or adjust existing programs due to pandemic. I think the situation with schools closing and people working from home, and what we heard from Mark about the shift in food purchasing from food away from home to food at home, also was reflected in things like our food distribution programs. So how is the school lunch program being implemented when schools are closed? How do we get food to folks through food banks and food box programs? And how do we ensure that that's happening? And we need data to be able to see how those programs are being delivered, how those impacts are, or those trends are occurring, and enable us to make decisions in response to that.
Great. And James, maybe you can go first. I mean, you've been in this game for a long time. What's making your job easier and helping you make decisions?
Yeah, I mean,
some of these tools. Yeah.
Piggyback off of Chris on kind of a department level and the coordination that was needed in order to determine when we should reopen our facilities, right? RD, or rural development, often co-locates, has office locations with Farm Service Agency as well as NRCS, right? Our Resource Services, National Resource Services Conservation Group. And, how does one agency make a decision about opening office without discussing this with others? Yeah, there's ways to do it, but what they were able to do by having a centralized platform where we're looking at a reopening dashboard with all the same data, same metrics. Yeah. Right. There's no confusion there. Of course, there was agreement. It took a while to us all to get on board on what we would be using. But once we were there, we had daily updates on what was happening with COVID, how that may impact our openings or not, how we could go different stages of reopening those offices so we could better serve our customers. Because in some cases, we need to be there. With our rural housing and our single family housing that goes to very low income communities, they're not online, right? They make payments sometimes in person. So and it's the same thing with our farmers as well. And so it was critical to get people back in the office and of course do it in a safe and healthy way and so forth. But without that centralized platform that was developed and without having those dashboards, I don't know how, I mean, we would have somehow figured it out, right? But it was a remarkable feat. So I want to give a shout out to Chris and Ted for that, because that was massive. And of course, their dashboard adoption, as he said, doubled, is probably tripled then, because everyone was going to this dashboard, right? And then just on a kind of on a rural agency or development level, it's a very similar type of situation. 3 siloed agencies, basically masters of their own data, not really all that interested or willing to share that with others outside of the financial office for auditing purposes. But when it comes to actually looking at program delivery, effectiveness, impact of our programs, not a lot of interest in coordinating, but by bringing them together, looking at the benefit or the utility of actually sharing this data, being able to inform how this is going to impact their own stuff. It's been it's been massive, right? We're still baby steps, but it is a pretty significant culture change for us in rural development.
Yeah. Mark, you want to add anything to that? You're on mute, Mark.
I think both
There you go.
Chris and James covered sort of substance of this is focusing on food assistance programs and how they're implemented, where the impacts are, and it's a major issue. So analyzing those, getting the data is the information that guides everybody has played an important role in all of that. But I will add one more thing to this, is that we are able to get our hands on data that are absolutely paramount to looking at what's going on the ground in terms of how consumers are behaving, and making that data available, at least to our USDA colleagues, on the systems that are provided, or us providing it to researchers to further examine these issues, is another major contribution that ERS has had on this.
No, that's fantastic. And the next question goes to food, one of my favorite subjects. I think I've tried to keep every restaurant in town open, delivering. One question, I'm going to make this for you, Mark, since it was kind of your topic. What does prepared foods restaurants deliver to the home fall? Is it FAH or FAFH? I forget what those acronyms are, but I was really surprised when I saw that. Intuitively, I thought restaurants had dropped more, but what I'm feeling is there was a lot of takeout there, and it kind of subsidized the in-person experience. But I didn't want to extrapolate from the data. But did you guys measure that, the takeout piece, or was it just out? Was it just restaurants and at home?
So what I showed you was everything I showed you was food at home in terms of rich detail that we got our hands on. And the initial graph that I showed you was our expenditure, aggregate expenditure for food at home and food away from home. And so I think your question is on disaggregating that food away from home across various types of restaurants and how that's basically distributed, that impact across that spectrum of providers. We have recently got our hands on some data from National Purchase Diary that has all of that detail, and we are digging into that. I think you're right that initially the impact was pretty severe, but that people have adopted to that. It hasn't come back to the level it was, but the distribution is quite different across different venues.
Yep, very interesting. And did you use a forecasting model for this analytic? I think that was for you, Mark. I think they were talking about the food. I'm not quite sure, but if not, we'll.
For food prices, we have some forecasts, but for right now, I think the most important thing really is to get your arms around, as Jim put it, is around real-time, high-frequency data. That's what we need, and we really didn't have it up to this point. And I think under Ted and Chris, emphasis has been placed on getting those types of data and putting them on EDAP for everybody to get access to. If that answers your question.
Yep.
So yeah.
I think so. Got another interesting question from an interesting person. Boy, we got a smart crowd out there. You're gonna have to congratulate yourselves for all these great questions you're asking. How is using geospatial data to drive better decisions to the USDA? And USDA has been using geospatial data for a while. Is there, I know there's a lot of new techniques for, and maybe that I know we have it for the next panel. There's some more geo over there. How is geo being incorporated into all the research that you all are doing in your day-to-day work? Does anybody want to take that? Maybe Chris from the department level, maybe first, and then we'll see what these gentlemen want to add. Yeah.
Thanks for that. I think that's a great question. In fact, USDA is I think a really big consumer and user of geospatial data. We have probably close to 10 petabytes of geospatial data. It's used all across the organization. I'm not even going to be able to kind of speak to all the use cases that we have, but it is really, geospatial data is really important. Two examples that I can think of. One is on the Forest Service side. One of their really important functions, as we've seen this year, is fighting forest fires and also trying to mitigate the risk of forest fires going forward. And so they use a lot of geospatial data, information about the forests, soil, ground cover, all kinds of characteristics about the land and the terrain to feed into models that give them ideas of wildfire risk and maybe best measures that can help to mitigate that and reduce that risk. Another example I can think of is one at the Farm Service Agency that uses geospatial data to help with crop estimates and understanding what is being produced, help to give them ideas and senses of what the yields might be, and really help them understand what is being, what's out there as far as on the farms, types of crops being produced, and they use a lot of satellite imagery and geospatial data to help them with that analytics.
Great. James or Mark, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, geospatial is, we're certainly not at the same level, say the Forest Service or NRCS or others who are really pioneers in some ways with geospatial analytics. But we've been using it for years. You may not, I know you won't be surprised to hear this, Tom, but it's hard to define rural, right? And so when you're trying to define rural and you have programs that are supposed to serve rural customers, we're using geospatial analytics to be able to make that determination. Is this a town of 10,000? Is it close to an urbanized area? How would that impact their eligibility or not? So, even to the public, we have a lot of we call them eligibility maps, right? That really look to say, are you eligible for our programs? Because it's never cut and dry. And often comes down to that staff person in that particular county to have to make a decision. But anyway, certainly use it there on the kind of program side. In my own shop, we were starting to use it more to really think about, our secretary is it's all about customer experience, right? How to serve our customers best. And so we're looking at a lot of our offices across the country. And in cases where we know that it's important for us to have actually that interaction, that person-to-person experience, how do we actually optimize where we locate our offices or just our workforce in general, right? Even if we're online, where are there places we should be putting more emphasis and target more of our resources? There's always pockets of communities of greater need that we aren't serving. So we're using within my group a lot of just targeting and strategic investment using geospatial analysis.
I add to
Great,
that,
Mark.
I add to that this is a very important question. And most of our analysis is micro level data at a very specific geographic area. When it comes to food access, low income areas are really important when you juxtapose the various policies, food program policies administered by states and counties. And so the interaction between all of those things and how it impacts people, that's where everything is. If you're looking at assessing the impact of any program or policy, that's where you're gonna have to be. I add the most important question, put it on the table. Anytime you do that, you're gotta be really, really careful of privacy and security issues. You just can't use those data willy-nilly.
We're going to be talking about that in the next panel as well as the Forest Service. So stay tuned. We're going to go in a little more depth there. Thank you for that. And another question about industry days or vendor engagement. And I think that's one of the reasons ATARC is working with the USDA to get these stories out there so the vendor community knows what your challenges are. I know USDA, they would have these lunch and learns in the USDA cafeteria at 14th and Independence. Maybe Chris, what have you seen? It's a little difficult. We're in a tough environment, but that's one of the reasons we talked to your CIO, Gary Washington, about doing this, but it is probably been a little tougher for agencies to communicate to industry.
Yeah, I think it probably has been a bit tougher. I would say, you know, from the data analytics side, from the work that we're doing, a lot of our requirements and what we're looking to do to keep the platform modern and using the best available tools comes from the needs from our mission areas. And so we are really looking to understand what our analysts across USDA need to be able to do to deliver services. And then we're working through our governance process and our governance bodies to help us determine and assess what those tools might be. And so this is an area that we probably could be doing more of in the future. But I think as we scale up our analytics capabilities and start to deal with big data, machine learning applications that are really needing to take advantage of cluster computing, what are the best tools out there that can help us do that in a productive and efficient way? You know, we don't have a specific maybe industry day planned in the near future, but I think that's a good question and something we'll take back and think about.
Well, maybe we can figure out a way to partner with that, you know, once the administration looks like it's going to change, and we can figure that out. But that's a good question. I think it's sometimes it'll save cycles for everybody that they can, you know, that they understand your mission so they don't waste your time and you don't waste their time. So I think I'm in agreement with all that. Question for James. Thank you much for the information. How does COVID impact the program delivery for rural development? While many things are moving online, the rural population may not be well positioned for this shift. Any actions that rural development has taken to better serve those with limited online access and mobility?
Yeah, so when the pandemic started, we pretty quickly went to almost 100% telework. And then with the understanding that most of our systems, well, all of our systems are online. I mean, there are still paper systems out there in certain USDA. I'm not going to name names, but there's, you know, all of our transactions are digitized or become digitized. So we knew we could work online. In fact, we had no slowdown in our work at all during the period, and had our largest obligation year in FY20. This is just a really interesting statistic, because there was just a survey that went out to rural banks that showed, you know, coming into this quarter, and the last quarter was the lowest amount of lending they've put out since like 2006. Right? It's a maybe not 2006. I forgot what exactly the year was, but it was a remarkable level of not much lending going on. On the other hand, we have the inverse, doing more loans than we've ever done before. And that includes ARA. So and part of it is just we're dealing with essential services, right? We're talking about healthcare facilities, schools, hospitals, public safety, fire stations, everything, right? As well as the housing. And we have been able to meet our most of the need of our rural customers. Certainly the businesses and all the utilities, right? All that transaction can happen online. With our housing customers, we've had to put people back into the offices in order to support that part of it, to receive applications, provide support as needed. But quite frankly, it's in my hand's always off to hats always off to them for all our program staff in our field offices that have been able to continue to really work through this incredible time and continue to serve our customers.
And James, I know you're more on the data side, but we got some reoccurring questions about, and I look at it as more of a digital transformation thing, about using mobile phones, because most of people they might not have you know, a computer, a traditional computer or a laptop with internet access. Most people have phones. I mean, even if you're poor, generally speaking, the poor are some of the biggest adopters of mobility. So if anybody wants to talk about that, I think that's becoming more of a movement that's been happening for a while with you all.
No, I agree, and we're
to reach them. Yeah,
and we're moving in that same direction. Where, you know, of course, you can certainly go online to do all our applications. Can you do it in a mobile-friendly way with the handheld device? We've already made some strides that way, and we'll continue to go that way with a lot of our programs.
Yeah, I think we've seen with COVID, I've done enough of these webinars where we're not going to have the traditional interaction with our government anymore. We're not going to the Social Security office to take our 96-year-old grandmother to go get some paperwork. It's going to have to be done online. We've seen a lot of changes in healthcare as well. There's a lot of discussion, good discussion around sharing and leveraging data to drive positive results as USDA's data environment matures and moves from reactive to more strategic operating model. How does the group see data ops being leveraged to spin up new pipelines, analytics tools, and solutions more quickly and effectively? You want to maybe start off with Chris, and then we can go to our other colleagues. Because if you want to step back, usually you spend 80% of your time getting the setup. It's the traditional way to do data. It takes a while. I got to spin up a server, and you spend less time doing the actual work that you're good at. How are we trying to upend that paradigm, Chris?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think to me, it's one where, we're always looking for ways to improve and enhance the platform to deliver our services more effectively, whether it's streamlining operations, improving our processes and workflows, ensuring greater robustness to the platform and to the tools that are on it, I think are all part of that. But also, again, I'll give a plug for the importance of our data governance within USDA. We have a structure where needs can be brought to a governance board. They can be raised. Hey, we have a capability. Yeah, we need to be able to do this type of analytics. Maybe it's there's a need to do some geospatial analytics, and our current on-prem solution is undersized, or my laptop where I usually do analytics can't get the job done, or I have to let it run for a week while it's computing. So we're looking at how do we solve those kinds of problems? We're looking at things like a shared analytics environment that's in the cloud, enables analysts to come in and get access to data, share it amongst each other, improve the collaboration tools, but also to take advantage of greater compute power. So if there's a really big, complicated project, they can take advantage of cluster computing and GPUs to help get that work done, but in a way that I think is effective for cost-effective for USDA. We can, with cloud solutions, we can spin things up, we can wind them down, and I think that's really a way for us to be able to deliver capabilities to the business in a way that's effective from a technology perspective.
Great. Any final thoughts? We're running a little late, oops. But this conversation has gone so great, I wasn't paying attention at the time. But maybe, James, anything final that you want to add? Any final perspectives?
Maybe it's not much of a summary, but just the first thing that popped in my head as we spun up our own data analytics group, it took us almost 2 years just to get the data in a way that we could actually start doing more advanced analytics. 2 years, right? Now, and we were fortunate in the sense that happened, and we really felt like we had confidence in the amount of data that we had on our entire loan portfolio that we can start using this for predictive analytics getting ahead of COVID. A year ago, we couldn't have done anything. Right, and a lot of it is with old on-prem servers, trying to deal with the tabular data warehouse with 16 different source systems coming into it, and it's like the Wild West in some ways. And we've been able to wrangle that a little bit and get us to a place we are. And part of it is leveraging what the department's offering in terms of a cloud solution for the server, so that we run with our tabular dashboards and our analytics off of their cloud server, and it just allows us a much better interaction, allows us to actually do it, as opposed to on-prem server where I'd still be seeing the spinning wheel of death as I waited for my data to process. That's what I'll leave you with, the spinning wheel of death, what we all hate.
The spinning wheel of death, okay. And Mark?
IRI data is 10 terabytes of information, and it's geospatial. So every time you do some analytical work, it's absolutely resource intensive. Complexity of that is when you're interacting with external researchers, how do you give access to them and keep them happy because something doesn't take about a week to run and then crash. So yeah, that is a challenge.
Yeah, I've worked at the USDA. I don't know how many, data centers were under somebody's desk, and then you have a hang up in the middle of the night and you have to go back into the facility to reboot the computer. Hopefully we're getting away from those days. And Chris, you get the last word on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that really what we're trying to do is improve the overall capabilities. I think, one of the visions of our Secretary of Agriculture is for USDA to be a leading agency in terms of use of data, data-driven decision-making. I think what you've heard about today are really, various, maybe in some ways specific examples to COVID, but also underneath the hood, really examples of how USDA has made some really big strides in its ability to analyze data, to provide rapid solutions to our workforce, and solve problems that would have taken a lot longer or been impossible to do prior to some of the solutions that are in place. So I think that's been really a significant accomplishment, really something I recognize has been of great value to USDA.
Okay, that'll wrap up the panel. Thank you, James, Mark, and Chris. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions, or we did the best we could, but keep them coming for the next panel. So we'll bring on the next panel straight away here.
All right, thanks, Tom.
Thank
Everybody
you.
can come on, no problem. Thank you. Okay, we'll get right into our next panel. We have with us, let's start with Matthew Thompson, Research Forester, Human Dimensions Program, Rocky Mountain Research Station, USDA Forest Service. How are you doing today, Matthew?
Good. Good to be here. Thanks, Tom.
And I think we finally got somebody out of our time zone to be on one of these panels. So where do you hail from?
Well, I currently live in Fort Collins, Colorado, but I appreciate all of the folks from Northern Virginia. That's where I was. That's where I was born and raised. UVA alum, still college basketball national champions. So, but we love Colorado. Colorado was like Northern Virginia with mountains.
You had me until you went to down the Virginia road, because I went to Virginia Tech, but we won't let that interfere with we'll still be professional. But actually, I love Fort Collins. I actually went there this summer for a big long road trip, and it's just a great place. It's highly recommended. They've got some good breweries if you're into that kind of thing, which I am. Fantastic. Next, we have with us Cynthia Parr, and Cynthia is the Acting Assistant Chief Data Officer for Research, Education, and Economics, REE, Agricultural Research Center, ARS, at the United States Department of Agriculture. Good afternoon, Cynthia.
Hi, Tom. I'm coming to you from Beltsville, Maryland.
Beltsville, you're like right by the office over there. Have you actually been back to the office yet?
This is my office. So.
Oh, this is your office. This is actually.
I came in today. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
First time in months.
Wow. I know that some of the leadership had been going back to their offices, and now it's gradually, everybody's gradually getting back. So I guess that's a good sign. Next up, we have with us Dr. Simon Liu, Associate Administrator, getting a little tongue-tied today, Administrator, Research Management Operations, Research Education and Economics, or REE, at the Agricultural Research Center Service, at the United States Department of Agriculture. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Liu.
Thank you very much, Tom. Good afternoon.
Are you in the office too?
Yes, I'm in my office in Beltsville.
In Beltsville, okay.
Yep.
Fantastic. Do you both work at the same office, or you're like both in there today? No?
No, my office is usually in downtown DC, but today I come to, during the pandemic, I come to Beltsville.
Okay, great. Makes a lot of sense. And last but not least, we have with us Andy McIsaac, Director of Solutions Marketing for Public Sector at Alteryx. How are you doing today, Andy?
Doing fine, Tom. I'm up here in New England, in Massachusetts, specifically Central Mass, right outside of Worcester, my home office, with my with my furry
You
colleagues.
got your Red Sox. Is
Yes.
that Ted Williams up there in the corner?
There is Ted Williams, yeah.
This has nothing to do with anything, but my grandfather played professional baseball for the A's. And when he went 6 for 8, they played the A's, and my grandfather was in that game. I think he was one of the last surviving members of that. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, the
He's
doubleheader.
a footnote in trivia.
Yeah, doubleheader at the end of the 1941 season. Yeah.
Yeah, so he went 6 for 8, and instead of hitting 399.9, here we're talking about data and analytics. So 399.999 or whatever, he hit 406, and the rest is history. So great. Okay. Why don't we start off with you, Dr. Liu, and talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, and I think you have some slides to present as well.
Yes, please. Somebody can share the slide, please.
Yep, I think Alyssa's got it.
So let me kind of give you the introduction of ARS, the Agricultural Research Service. ARS is the largest public agricultural research institution in the world. Our mission is very simple: delivering scientific solutions to national and global agriculture challenges. So our vision is also clear. We'd like to be a global leader in agricultural discovery through scientific excellence. So currently we have roughly about 8,000 strong people, which include around 2,000 PhD research scientists and postdoctors, as well as 6,000 supporting employees. So our employees, they conduct research in over 90 research location laboratory around the country. Currently, ARS, we have about 690 research projects, and we organize our research project under 15 national programs for effective coordinations and management. So as a research organization, we really fully understand that the rapid population growth, shrinking farmland, decreasing natural resources, and unpredictable climate change are pushing the agricultural production system into a new paradigm. So these new paradigms must become more productive in output, more efficient in operation, and more resilient to climate change, and become very sustainable for our future generations. So we at ARS, we believe that artificial intelligence, AI, hold the promise to address the challenge of this new paradigm. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all about an ARS initiative to harnessing AI to transform agricultural research. So these slides show that our first step, we established an AI Center of Excellence. So the center plan, direct, and manage enterprise AI programs. It is organized as a virtual organizations with 5 major components. So they include a center director on the top to oversee the program, and 4 additional virtual teams to manage different AI program components. So those components include, on the left-hand side is an AI team to manage our AI technical infrastructure. On the right-hand side, on the top, is 3 committees to develop policies, standards, and training. And also on the lower left corner, we have a centralized AI team to provide AI support. And finally, we have several field AI teams to develop our AI use cases, manage data supply chain, and develop solutions to agricultural problems. So let's turn to the next page. So this slide summarizes our AI journey with 5 major steps. Like many other organizations, we start with the lower left corner, the awareness stage. During this phase, we had a few pioneers, we call it pioneers, they are really the leading scientists. Those pioneers explore the AI technologies, identify AI use cases and develop AI pilots to test the technology. Then we move to the active phase. During the active phase, those pioneer and other followers, they built, tested, and deploy a few AI applications. In the meantime, we developed a comprehensive AI training program to train and primarily train or retrain our existing workforce and hire a few key AI leaders. So currently we are moving to the third stage, so-called operational phase. We have developed a few applications in productions and established an enterprise data strategy, the enterprise AI data strategy. In the meantime, we continue to build our enterprise AI technology infrastructure and develop our AI workforce. We are hoping that we can move to the next phase, systemic phase in 3 years. To do so, we need to continue to push the envelope and apply the AI technology to many different application domains. We will also continue to invest in AI and mature our AI standards and governance. So our ultimate goal is to move to the so-called transformational phase in 5 years. By that time, I hope AI will be a part of our DNA. We could then fully harness the AI to transform agricultural research. Next page, please. So now I'd like to take a look at our AI technology infrastructure. Our AI technology infrastructure consists of 4 major components. First is a high-speed communication network to facilitate information exchange and collaboration. Second is a set of high-performance computing platforms to support data manipulation and scientific computing. And third is a set of storage systems to store and manage huge amount of agricultural data. And finally is an AI toolbox to provide AI application development tools and services. Next page, please. So now I'd like to kind of highlight the application of AI technology in multiple areas of agricultural research to showcase the range of AI solutions currently happening within ARS. In this slide, on the upper left corner is the Breeding Insight platform. A team of ARS scientists in Ithaca, New York, they have applied machine learning to speed up the breeding, especially the special crop breeding, by 3 to 5 times. This project was led by a member of National Academy of Science of our scientists. On the lower left corner, a team of data scientists, this is where Cynthia belonged to, at the National Agricultural Library in Beltsville, Maryland. They have applied natural language processing and machine learning to automate article indexing and tagging. Moving to the upper right corner, working with Microsoft and several other companies, a team of ARS scientists in Maryland, in Beltsville, Maryland, and also North Carolina. They have applied different AI technology to boost agricultural productivity by increasing yield, reducing cost, and cut down input cost. Finally, in the lower right corner, a team of scientists in Kernersville, West Virginia, and also Geneva, New York, they have used computer vision, imaging processing, and machine learning to develop the robots for automatic fruit trees, the pruning. So primarily the apple trees and others. Moving to the next slide. So on the upper left corner, AIS scientists in Stoneville, Mississippi, and Fort Collins, Colorado, they have applied AI technology to develop smart irrigation system to conserve water resources and increase water efficiency. On the lower left corner, another team of AI scientists in Ames, Iowa, and Columbia, Missouri, they have applied neural network and deep learning technology to forecast the expected crop productions and yield over a given location or area. On the upper right corner, AI scientists in Clay Center, Nebraska, and University Park, Pennsylvania, they have applied AI guide facial recognition technology to better cattle management and monitoring. Finally, on the lower right corner, AI scientists in Beltsville, again, Beltsville, they have applied AI technology to monitor and identify possible crop health issues or nutrition deficiency in the soil. Next page, please. So, to better coordinate AI projects, share AI experience, and develop AI workforce, AIS, we had convened an AI conference and 5 AI workshops last year. A total of over 400 scientists, they have participated in those conference and workshops. Our scientists have co-authored many AI application papers. Among them, 8 articles was accepted by the IT Professional magazine, published by the IEEE Computer Society, showing on the screen. So here is the list of AIS AI application paper on a special issue titled AI in Agriculture, which was published in May of 2020. It's pretty new publication. So this will conclude my brief presentation. Again, we are very proud of what we have accomplished so far. However, we're still in the early stage of our AI journey. A lot of opportunities and challenges are ahead of us. We will continue our journey and invite all of you to journey along with us. Thank you. Back to you, Tom.
That was fantastic. I never would have thought that we were going to like facial recognition for cows' faces. That's really outside the box thinking. I like that. You learned something new on these. That kind of stuck out to me. That's fantastic. And maybe we can send out a link to that, to your research. That'd be great. I think people would like to peruse that. Next, we are going to have with us Cynthia Parr. Cynthia?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So as Acting Assistant Chief Data Officer for the Research, Education, and Economics Mission Area, I lead data and analytics strategy across the 4 research agencies and the Office of Chief Scientist for USDA. And those 4 agencies combined represent about $3.5 billion of investment in agricultural research. You heard about ARS from Dr. Liu, and Mark Dembali earlier was talking about work at the Economic Research Service. So today I'll just briefly highlight a couple of examples of activity in artificial intelligence from the 2 other agencies in our mission area. First, NASS, the National Agricultural Statistics Service, has embarked on a cloud computing pilot to test the value of machine learning in producing planted acreage predictions, as well as to assess the quality of those predictions. And more specifically, they're actually building on work that they started back in October of 2019 to use machine learning to forecast corn and soybean planted acreage, starting with the state of Illinois, using geospatial remote sensing imagery, as well as Farm Service Agency administration records that are linked to NASS's farm operations data. They're particularly interested in updating model estimates with in-season information throughout the growing season, and also in assessing areas that are at risk of falling into a prevent plant status. Starting in January, they're going to expand and scale up their models and begin using EDAPT, that USDA enterprise platform that Ted Kaup talked about earlier. And they'll be linking that FSA and NASS frame data to 10 corn and soybean states. They'll compare the relative accuracy of different kinds of imagery, different granularities of imagery, 3 meter if they can get the funding for it, 10 meter imagery, and 30 meter data in those models. And eventually, they hope to scale those analyses to more states so that by fiscal year 23, they can produce validated and very timely state and national estimates of corn and soybean and prevent plant acreage using those methods. It's really important for NASS to be using EDAP because it can ensure that the highly sensitive farm level FSA and NASS data is properly protected, but at the same time used to the maximum extent possible using these really cutting edge methods and that imagery that will make it possible to do these very timely estimates quickly using cloud computing. So the second example I want to mention is that NIFA, our extramural research funding agency, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, is investing heavily in AI research. Just in the last year, it's provided about $50 million under 2 programs, Food and Agriculture Cyber Informatics Tools, and the Artificial Intelligence Institute's program in collaboration with the National Science Foundation. So the first AI institutes funded by NIFA are being led by 3 universities, Purdue, UC Davis, and University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And each of these institutes, which is very well funded, has partners at other universities, as well as unfunded collaborations in technology with partners such as IBM and Microsoft, as well as with NGOs and agricultural industry players such as Mars and the Culinary Institute of America. Just a note, some of the folks on this call may be preparing their applications for the next round of AI institutes that are due tomorrow, or maybe they're not on the call today because they're busy with those proposals. I want a special note for this panel in particular that all of those AI institutes include, and I'm quoting here from NIFA, they include consideration of explainable and trustworthy AI, validation of AI-enabled systems, AI safety, security, and privacy, and the role of emotion and affect in the design and perception of increasingly sophisticated machine intelligence. So the hope is that by investing in research on these areas, we can continue to raise the bar and do a better and better job of doing AI safely. I don't have time right now to discuss a third activity, which is how we're addressing the major challenge within our mission area of increasing the capacity among our staff to use some of these advanced analytics techniques, but perhaps we can talk about it more in the discussion. So for that, thank you.
Yep. Sure, thank you, Cynthia. And we are definitely going to touch on AI ethics in this discussion. It's really a fascinating topic, and I think that everybody needs to think about it and understand how important it is. Next, we have Matthew Thompson, Research Forester. Again, Research Forester, Human Dimensions Program, Rocky Mountain Research Station at the USDA Forest Service.
Okay, yeah, I have a few slides too. So Alyssa, if you wouldn't mind, please putting the opening slide up. So I work for the USDA Forest Service. We manage about 193 million acres of our nation's forest and grasslands with the mission to sustainably manage them for present and future generations. 2 kind of things of note about the Forest Service that are germane to the presentation today. One, just like ARS is for agriculture, we are the nation's largest, if not the world's largest, forest research organization within Forest Service R&D, where I work. And I work for the Rocky Mountain Research Station, which is the largest research organization within Forest Service R&D. And then secondly, within the Forest Service's mission includes response to wildfire. And we are the largest fire management organization in the US and the globe. So I will just instead.
Yeah, I don't know if she has them queued up. So if you can share, Matthew, that'll work out fine.
So Perfect. Let me know if you're seeing a screen.
Yep, we see it. Yep.
Okay. So are you seeing machine learning and wildfire operations?
You got it. Yep.
Okay. So you know, one thing that will be a little bit different from the presentations we've heard today is, you know, I am a worker bee. I'm an R&D, so I don't have this programmatic perspective. Instead, what we're going to be talking about today is really more of an organic. These are some tools that evolved out of R&D, working with some managers on the ground, going back about 5 or more years, and fast forward to today, and they're now being deployed widely on national forests and adjacent landscapes throughout primarily the Western USA. I should say that I personally am not a data scientist. I work with a great team that has a lot of those skills and competencies. I'm kind of interested in, from the organizational side, how do we leverage analytics and machine learning and AI to achieve organizational objectives, specifically here, safe and effective response to wildfire. And then also, how do we effectively imbue them into management and decision making? And so that is really important in the realm of kind of communicating and uptake. And so, Tom, I was pleased to hear you mention the Oakland A's because Billy Beane. So we have been using the phrase data-driven decision-making with the field for a long time now, and you can see their eyes glaze over and the words go over the head. We tried evidence-based decision-making, not so much uptake. When we started using the phrase money ball for fire, people got it. We started making baseball analogies. We started making basketball analogies. For example, that air tanker drop of thousands of gallons of retardant on that steep slope and heavy timber with extreme fire activity is kind of like taking a mid-range jumper, which is one of the lowest effectiveness shots in the game. And that sort of crosswalk, that translation really started to be effective. There were a lot of COVID-related concerns for this fire season. There was actually pre-existing infectious disease guidelines for a wildfire, especially on these long duration, large incidents. You will have hundreds, if not thousands of personnel who all convene in the same location for nutrition, for sleeping, for getting briefings. So it was already identified as an infectious disease risk prior to the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. So we did some epidemiological modeling. We created a risk assessment dashboard to help managers kind of modify logistics, remote briefings, dispersed camping. I'm not really going to focus on that today. What instead I'm going to focus on is the use of machine learning to support kind of strategic and tactical decisions of where, when, why, and how to send resources. And that was really important this season as well for at least 2 principal reasons. One, there was the anticipation of resource scarcity. At the time when we were planning back March, April, and May, we did not know what to expect in terms of how many firefighters may be in isolation or quarantine or out of the workforce due to being ill. So there was the expectation that we may be operating with less personnel, and therefore there was a need to be more efficient and kind of very, very kind of precise in where we chose to engage fires, kind of with the minimal amount of resources and the minimal amount of exposure necessary. And so that is really the basis of the remainder of this talk. Just quickly to do some background, this is from a recent paper that is reviewing the use of machine learning and AI in wildland fire science and management. And we don't need to belabor it, but there are really 2 key points that I wanted to draw your attention to. First, on the top, you can just see that in the past 5 years, there's really been this rapid onset of applications in wildland fire science and management. And I think you will see that trend continue. Second, on the table below, this is kind of a nice synthesis that breaks down by method. So across the top, we have things like genetic algorithms, deep learning, random forest, boosted regression, et cetera. But also, if you go down the rows, kind of the application domains. And there's been a lot of work methodologically using tools like random forest, boosted regression, support vector, and maximum entropy. But in terms of the application domain is where I'm more focused. I want to see what this can do to help management and decision making. I'm less of a methods guy. You'll see a lot of the work is on remote sensed data. So looking at area burned, looking at fire occurrence prediction, looking at where fires do and don't occur on the landscape. What I have highlighted, our interest is in wildfire operations, or actual response to it. And that is one of the least populated rows on this table. So kind of that was where we viewed our team's kind of value add. And so actually one of my colleagues, Kit O'Connor, will be presenting tomorrow on this subject, and he can speak a lot more eloquently, but he's the brains and the brawn behind this tool. What we're really trying to do is infuse analytics into both planning and operational decision making. So So at the upper left, what we have here is the machine learning model. It's using boosted regression, although we've also explored some other tools like artificial neural networks. It is trained on thousands of historical fire perimeters in relation to characteristics of the landscape, like topography, distance from road, fuel type, potential fire behavior, et cetera. And on the basis of that, you can identify a probability surface where you are more or less likely to control fire based upon how fires have moved across that landscape in the past. As you go down, what we have now done on dozens and dozens of landscapes across the Western US is embedded that into operationally focused planning efforts with local managers. So they then take this as one input into a workshop planning process to identify those control opportunities on the landscape, and they can then tier that into strategic response strategies and objectives. Now, as we go to the right, we're transitioning into real-time incident decision support. So we have a team of analysts that kind of get deployed on a request by request basis to large, significant, and complex incidents throughout the country. This would just be one example of a map that would have been developed within a day or two of the request used by the local incident management team. And one of the reasons we kind of like the boosted regression approach as opposed to perhaps maybe a neural network is there's some ability to kind of display what's underneath the hood. So on the lower right there, you can see that bar chart that shows kind of the relative importance of some of the predictor variables. And natural barriers, distance from road often show up. I should say that, as many of you are probably aware, this fire season in particular was very taxing. So we had been concerned about resource scarcity due to COVID, quarantine, isolation, illness. And then on top of that, you had a very active fire season. So resource scarcity was very much a problem. These tools that Kit and his colleagues develop in real time, I think were done more than 100 times this season. It was well over 60 large fire incidents, many of which requested updated models in response to changing conditions, including one here, including several here rather, in Fort Collins, Colorado. We had a smoky summer. Okay, the one thing to note about that model, for all of the uptake it's had, and now managers know it and request it, it's no longer, what is that thing that R&D is doing? It's give me that thing. It's trained purely on historical fire perimeters without any information on what actions we were taking to contain and control it. So there's really a bottleneck here. There's a lack of robust descriptive analytics on the effectiveness of response. So that kind of inhibits our ability to create operationally relevant and empirically credible kind of predictive and prescriptive analytics. That's the next generation, that's the next horizon we're pursuing. Can we not only identify where fire is likely to stop on this landscape, but inform decisions of what types of resources, engines, helicopters, crews, when should you be sending them, where should you be sending them, under what conditions? So what we see here are examples of information that we can currently track. So we can get qualitative information from daily plans as to the tasks to which divisions and crews were assigned. This is from a study where a person sat down and read it. Now, certainly we could do some text scraping and natural language processing, but that's something we're exploring. On the bottom left, we can recreate fires on an incident by incident basis where there is good kind of progression maps, but that is still divorced from specific information on what resources we're doing when. We can also do post hoc analysis of where we identified where we actually built fire containment lines, either leveraging roads or using shovels and other hand tools to kind of create barriers to spread, and then we can evaluate how effective they were. But what has been kind of the missing holy grail is this idea that we could track in real time where resources are moving and attribute that not only with timestamps, but what they were doing, how effectively they were doing it, and why. And so, you know, just in the past couple of days, I've talked with some colleagues who were doing tracking of firefighters for a totally different set of objectives. They're trying to track physiological metrics like heart rate, temperature, smoke exposure. But it turns out that they also have GPS tracks and attributed qualitative data on the tasks to which they were assigned. So we're starting to see this merging of, if we can have GPS devices on engines, on crews as they're moving around, we can, moving to the right side of the figure now, we can overlay that GPS track in relation to an actual fire incident. This is the 2017 Highline fire in Arizona. And you can see on the bottom right, that is a potential control location machine learning map that Kit O'Connor built. we have overlaid on top of that the fire perimeter. In the upper right and in the lower right, that purple/pink line corresponds to the actual route that a crew took. Now, I personally don't know what specifically that corresponds to, whether they were doing scouting of the fire or dropping resources off, or maybe doing point protection for some homes. But the point is, this is the horizon to which we're moving. So all of a sudden, if we have, thousands, if not millions of timestamp data points of where crews were in relation to all of the other data we're already training our model with, we think that we're going to be able to get much better information on kind of prescriptive analytics of what type of resource strategies and tactics we should be deploying. Okay, but with that comes some thorny issues. So, that previous slide was the promise of resource tracking, and we could equally acknowledge the perils of resource tracking. And I think the big one here, at least as I see it, is that the objects of interest here are humans, and really we're talking about human behavior. So there has to be some sort of opt-in. There has to be some sort of consent to be tracked. I was having a conversation with some colleagues the other day where in all of the previous examples I showed, they went through review board approval and they had opt-in, but it was the supervisors who opted in on behalf of their crew. And also a lot of it was in training mode. So, what are the consent issues that we're gonna have to grapple with? The Forest Service as an organization may be able to mandate its employees to do this, but it's worth mentioning that most of these incident response management teams are interagency. So a crew of 20 may have people from state organizations, Department of Interior organizations, and Department of Agriculture organizations. So what does consent look like? The second issue is data privacy. There has been some concerns voiced about Big Brother watching every single step and action that they take, and is there going to be constant Monday morning quarterbacking of, oh, it looked like you took a 20-minute break when you were supposed to have been cutting fire line. I think there's some concerns around privacy, just like there are with, anonymizing cell phone. Another point that was recently brought to my attention, and to be honest, this was a bit of a blind spot for me, was there's potential to be bias in the data. So just like if you train a machine learning algorithm in the judicial system, if there's implicit bias in all of the cases on how they've been done, for example, looking at issues of race or gender, that will play out in how the model is trained off of the data. So a lot of this data was viewed to very specific crews with very homogeneous characteristics. And then if you train the model exclusively on that and then try to apply it to a different set of individuals with different characteristics, especially if you're using it as a measure of performance, I think there are some thorny issues there, and we are just beginning to grapple with those issues. And so I'd be happy to make the slide available. I don't want to belabor all of the papers here, but just to point out that I benefited from a lot of colleagues who helped me corral this information, and there's a lot of work in the literature and a lot of work that's ongoing. So I'll stop sharing there, but thanks for your time.
No, Matthew, that's fantastic. And I am really familiar with USDA's mission, and really it's 1960s radios out there right now. So what you're proposing is the Call of Duty type of experience where you know where everybody is in Blue Force tracking, like the military. And it's really, you're skipping like 3 generations of technology to do this. But right now, there's a lot of inefficiencies as well as people getting hurt and dying because they can't communicate properly. So I'm glad you're looking at all this. And but anyway, our last panelist is Andy McIsaac. And Andy, I know you've had the experience of working kind of across agencies. So you kind of had the opportunity to see kind of what works and what doesn't work. Looking forward to your perspectives.
Yeah, I'll just briefly go over kind of what we see as our point of view around what makes up a foundation for responsible AI, and I think a lot of it was touched upon in this session here, but also in actually I'm not gonna go to the charts. We'll just go. I'll just talk. So first off, I think Gartner calls out that key factor in any successful AI endeavor does require a strong level of data management, data governance, and analytics maturity. And obviously, Chris talked about what's going on within the USDA and how you're looking up to build up that capability. So that's obviously a great step in the right direction. But you really have to understand what your current status is. What barriers are you facing? What access to data issues are you facing? What legacy systems are you stuck in? Are you still managing things by spreadsheet? You know, and how do you alleviate some of that? And how do you really build a culture of data? And that's really going to enable you to really allow AI and machine learning capabilities to take hold. So things like, self-service analytics and having a platform that unifies analytics across the organization is absolutely key. And get to, I think, a point that Cynthia was talking about. How do you take some of these advanced tools and get it down to, every level of data worker? Things like geospatial analysis, natural language processing, predictive and prescriptive prescriptive analytics. How do you make those accessible to the largest, group of users and not have to rely on your highly trained data scientists to do all of that work, because they're the ones who are going to be developing a lot of the AI and machine learning models that actually go into operation. And I think the second factor you have to look at is really accountability. How do you keep humans in the loop, right? How do you avoid a lot of black box type of AI where you don't have insight to actually what's happening, but you're more to a clear box AI where keeping humans involved in the loop? Is your analytics platform designed around the human experience, the user? And by keeping humans in the loop, you're going to avoid a lot of those issues around accountability and have a better understanding of what's actually happening within your AI models. And I think the third thing you need to look at is transparency, right? In really looking at one of the significant promises of AI and machine learning is the ability to harness data and drive insights specifically from unstructured data. But you have to understand, what you're doing with that data. What is the model actually doing? So with the Alteryx platform, we have capabilities around assisted modeling. So you can actually get in, even if you're not a classically trained data scientist, you don't know how to use R or Python or code in those languages. You still can leverage machine learning and then build models and understand what's actually happening. And so, when Matt was talking about some of the regressive models or the boosted models or some of the other predictive models, you can have a non-data scientist actually participate in and develop workflows in AI and machine learning and be guided along that process. But not only be guided, and it doesn't happen blindly, they can actually break down and see what's actually happening within that process. So I think it's really, again, keeping the humans at the center of it and lowering that center of gravity so you can allow a greater number of users to partake higher level analytics. And then, Matt talked about this too, bias, right? How do you get bias keep bias out? I mean, even when you leverage things like historical data, there could be bias built into that. Artificial intelligence, doesn't make moral judgments. It's not inherently biased, but when you use things like historical data, you have to have the context around how that data was created, where's that data sourced from, and how do you drive out that bias? And by consolidating and automating more mundane tasks around data and automate a lot of that, you can have your data resources focus more on the critical factors, such as driving out bias and really evaluating the data from a critical perspective. They don't have to spend a lot of cycles, accessing data and pulling data in and doing all the classic prep and blend stuff. If you can automate that, they can focus more on the analysis and really on the view of understanding what is actually in that data, and if I've done everything to kind of drive out that bias. So those are kind of, it at a high level. What we do at Alteryx is, we do have a human-centered design platform that allows data workers of every level, regardless of the technical acumen, to really participate in the analytic workflows and processes from prep and blend to, as I mentioned before, deploying advanced analytics such as geospatial, predictive, and even machine learning, all in a guided fashion. And you can really focus on up-leveling the skills of your existing data resources. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that, and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And while we're on the subject of bias, one of my first questions, and maybe I can direct it to Dr. Liu and Cynthia. How does this assessing bias fit into the work at USDA? How do you build that in, that look and And are there particular practices that you can use to minimize bias? Maybe we'll start off with you, Dr. Liu.
Well, I think the most important thing is that we need to make sure the quality of the data is good, and then whatever the machine inferencing is transparent. So if the data is biased, the application will be biased. So as result, really, we need to make sure, starting from the fundamental, we have a good quality data that without bias inherent inside the data set, and then make the learning process, the model transparent, so everybody has the chance to look into it, so to be able to eliminate the potential bias.
Great, great. Cynthia, you want to add anything to that?
Sure, I'll just say a couple of things. One is what Dr. Liu just said really points to the importance of openness and open science. And so we are doing our best to promote not only making the data available associated with these projects, but also the code that was used to generate the results and the scholarly output in our case for research. But I also want to go back to the concept of data stewardship, because this is one of those things that Ted Kauk and his colleagues have helped us set up throughout USDA. We actually have a data stewardship organization that crosses across all of the mission areas of USDA. And within each mission area, we have a community of practice, which will help those folks who are generating the data or managing the data be as fully up to speed on the opportunities for avoiding bias or for doing quality control on the data. And so Ted mentioned earlier that we're in the process of doing a workforce data skills assessment that's been led by Jim Barham that you heard from earlier. And part of the goal there is to figure out what is our baseline for the workforce, not just the folks who are actually doing the AI, but everybody who is potentially in that data pipeline to make sure that they understand not necessarily how to do the AI, but how it will be used and how to do the best they can do to make sure that the data going into those models is high quality, and that they understand how to interpret the results that come back out. And so this is really a very holistic perspective, because I guess as Andy was saying, you got to keep people in the loop. And you know, as much as you want your algorithms to do as much as you can for you, it is a much further reach to automatically detect that bias, although people are doing that work too. But again, it's all very cyclical.
Yeah, thank you for that. And let's go, Alyssa, let's go to our poll on this topic. And I think I'd love to hear from the audience on it. If you can pull up that first poll question, Alyssa. Okay, our first one, and feel free, audience, to answer this. When thinking about agricultural research, what is your most pressing concern about AI bias, fairness, and ethics? Pick the most important one. So we'll let this go for about 15 seconds. And I think there's going to be multiple choice on that, but we'll let that go. Alyssa, can we see the results? Here we go. All right. Looks like it's a little bit all over the board. Uneven workforce skills, a little bit of that. Lack of AI ethics training for researchers. Is there AI ethics training for researchers? You kind of like, we're kind of muddling through this as time goes on, learning more and more. Also bias and results of machine learning due to inadequate training data.
Right,
Dr.
if I can just interject. So Simon mentioned I'm actually sitting here at the National Agricultural Library, and we have a catalog of research data here called the Ag Data Commons. I am hoping, my vision for the next few years is to start cataloging training data and have it marked very clearly as to what its quality might be, what considerations you need to take into account when you use it. Again, this goes to open science. The more open it is, the more likely it is that we'll find the problems with it. And so over time, the idea is that the training data available for these kinds of machine learning analyses will get better and better. And so while we might be starting off right now, it's really quite a blocker to many projects, the availability of good training data. but the more we make the data available and reusable and understand how it came to be, the better those models will become.
Yeah, and I think this is a good place for all of government to come together because everybody has these problems. We have an AI ethics project team actually that is headed with the Department of Defense. The Joint AI Centers involved with it. It's one of the most fascinating things we do, as well as GSA and a lot of other government agencies. So, you know, if anybody wants to be a part of that, we can hook you up with that. And Dr. Liu, you want to add anything?
No, I just say, hey, I agree with the result here. The transparency of the algorithm is really, really critical. The AI is really a part of science. The key component of the science is repeatable. If you use the same algorithm, same set of the data to train an AI, and hopefully it will be able to repeat, and then the result will be predictable.
Yeah, and I'll just
Matthew?
add to that. I think, you know, in addition to the transparency of the analysis method, it's kind of the idiosyncrasies, flaws, and inaccuracies of the data itself. So in the fire world, we have a lot of operational data that's intended for operational purposes, and that's all that is. And so there have been a lot of researchers who have gone and performed a study on that data without having understood how it was created or why it was created. And frankly, some pretty high profile stuff got published with a very poor understanding of what they were doing. You know, we would have XY coordinates of certain things that were in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You know, there was just a huge need for QA, QC on that stuff. And so in recent years, some folks in R&D have undertaken the effort to go back, clean decades of data, and then make them as publicly available data repositories. And to what, you know, what I think Cynthia was saying, this whole idea of transparent data, the quality assessment, how do you use it, how do you not use it, I think is really essential.
Andy?
Yeah, I think just you know what Matt was saying. I mean, you have to understand the context of what the data was originally intended for, and not make it do unnatural acts. You know, I think, you know, being able to break down the models and understand, you know, what's actually happening to the data as it's being analyzed. You know, so things like assisted modeling enable you to do that. You can pick and choose between different algorithms or different types of predictive models, but really understand, you know, what is that predictive model trying to do? What factors is it looking at? I think you have to have that understanding so you can understand, you know, when you're looking at the results from that, you have the context. And I think it's really about understanding the context of the data and really the context of the algorithms that you're utilizing and what they're actually doing.
Great. Yeah, I think we're just beginning this discussion on AI ethics. I think that, you know, government's going to have a real big role in it. It's one of the places where we can take leadership. And if we don't take leadership in it, it's going to be the wild, wild west and going to be all over the place. I think that's where government definitely can do that. And hopefully HR can partner with you all on that. I'm going to change the topic a little bit. How has this field of analytics grown at USDA and just even in the last few years, and maybe, you know, how COVID has changed things, and what do we see? What is the USDA going to look like in the future? And maybe I can start off with you, Dr. Lee. You kind of showed us a few things there, but what's your opinion on that?
Essentially, AIS as a research organization, we recognize the importance of data and also data analytics. So as a result, 6 years ago, we start a program so-called a Big Data Project. Of course, it's a combination of several different components, but one of the key components is really the tool to analyze the huge amount of data and to make sense out of it. So I would say that data and data analytic and AI will continue to increase its importance over the time. And especially for us as a research organization, that is something that we cannot afford to get behind. We need to really re-emphasize, refocus, and then really to speed ahead so that we can get into the forefront of the research arena.
Great. Cynthia, you want to add something?
Sure. My perspective is that what we are in the process of doing, and I think it's been said earlier, is we're changing the culture at USDA. Yeah. And whereas in the past, there might have been a lot of almost startups, siloed in various parts where people got particularly enthusiastic about new technology and explored some new technique on their own. And then, you know, maybe they did or didn't share it with others in their organization, but it may not have been able to be sustained, or it may not have been a building process. So now we have the opportunity with these communities of practice to share those good ideas, because they're still going to emerge sometimes out there in silos, but to make sure that we can get them started up quickly using some central infrastructure, that we can make sure that more people have access to the tools that they need to do these things. And importantly, if they have done data cleaning, I saw one of the Q&A questions was about the importance of data cleaning. Once the data is cleaned once, don't make everybody do it again. Make it available so that it can be a starting point for bigger and better work, building on what was done in the past.
And I really like what you've done over at, you know, ARS. You're sharing within yourselves. Then you're part of the greater group with Ted and Chris, and then inside of USDA, and then they are on top of that interfacing with all the other agencies. I think it's an all the above strategy. Matthew, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, you know, maybe slightly less rosy. I mean, Chris said this earlier. The Forest Service does have a lot of data from remote sensing. I think I responded in the chat to one point about remote sensing applications in Geospatial Technology Center. So there's a lot about the status of our forest and grasslands and condition-based assessment, and that's shared far and wide. And I think the public availability of that data is really critical, and it's going to kind of continue to inform assessments and projections of how climate will affect our country, for example. To Cynthia's point about silos, those still exist and they're very real. Especially once you start looking at data from a performance evaluation perspective, I think that still makes people uncomfortable. I don't have the answer to that question, but I think, you know, to the point that Dr. Liu made about we're on a trajectory, you know, the cultural transformation doesn't happen overnight. But I think insofar as we can make inroads that show there's value here, and no, it's not Monday morning quarterbacking, it's organizational learning, the more those ideas can kind of be adopted and embraced, the better it will be.
Right. Andy?
Yeah, you know, I'll look at just in regard to COVID. I think, you know, one of the things that I've seen, the availability of data is really, to all levels of government, is really enabling the ability to help people and help communities. A case in point, kind of related to what happens, I think was talked about in the other session. Schools close across the country. You take a vast safety net of nutrition. We had one state that used you know, data based on, you know, where the schools were, where their foster children were, and they were able to, using geospatial analytics, actually proactively go out and notify families where they could find the needed nutritional support. What was the thing that was most convenient? So the schools may be closed, but we can redistribute and get the nutritional support to the families or to the communities in need. That was based on available federal data, available state data, school-based data. So the availability of data, you know, all levels of governments are now starting to look at, you know, in the face of COVID, but even before COVID, how can we actually utilize the insights to impact families, to impact communities, and help people?
Andy, you're kind of like leading into my next question, which I think we need to close on, is what has the impact been of COVID-19 on everything, the pace, how people are using data. We talked a little bit about the last panel, but you know, what's, you know, how does it affect you and your day-to-day job? Anything that we want to close on that? I'll start off with you, Dr. Liu.
Yes, ARS, we have been investigating the impact, especially at the research, the pandemic and the research project. So we're kind of looking at, believe it or not, we're looking at among the 690 projects, close to 5,000 milestones among the project. Well, based on our initial analysis, it's about 2.4% of our milestone get impacted by the pandemic. So right now we are zooming into those 2.4%. So what are the primary reasons behind that? Of course, there are many different reasons. For instance, shelter in place, there nobody can go anywhere, or the university closed, the partner, they're no longer available, and so on and so forth. So right now, our key initiative for the time being, I would say right now our priority is that, well, looks like the pandemic is it's going to continue for a little while. I don't know when it's going to close. So our main job is to come up with a so-called a mitigation plan so that we can minimize the impact to our research. So we have seen in the past, and then we are projecting for the future, and then we are developing the mitigation plan to address that. And all of that depends on the data and also the analytics.
And Cynthia?
I'll just add that it turns out that if you are sitting on a project that does not require you to actually go into a facility or into a field, you can actually devote all your time to that data-driven project. And so I think there's been a lot of good, I'm gonna say the glass is half full with respect to those projects, because I think people are realizing how valuable it is to have those available to do, and also to have the skills to be able to do them. And through this kind of communication through Zoom, to collaborate as we're doing it. And so I think we've had a crash course in how to do this kind of collaborative, large-scale, data-driven work that I think is going to change the character of a lot of the work that people are doing.
Hey, Tom, let me...
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Go ahead, Dr. Liu.
Now, let me kind of add a little bit upon what Cynthia was talking about. Indeed, like I said, we have about 2,000 PhD research scientists. During this pandemic period, the number of publications produced by the scientists increased because they're sitting at home, they're analyzing the data, so a number of publications increased. The area that impact was the field work. You need to go to the field, you need to go to somewhere, and that will be a little bit impact. But analyzing data is good. That's a good silver lining of this thing.
And the ability to collect data remotely, I think, will be much more appreciated because, you know, as the technology advances, we don't necessarily have to be in the field all the time. And so streaming data that's coming in or remote sensing data, that all will continue under conditions like this.
Yep, Matthew?
Well, to that last point, certainly I think the use of unmanned aerial systems is going to be a growing area of interest, not only just for monitoring, you know, conditions with LiDAR, but real-time monitoring, especially on fires. You know, that's going to be a major safety initiative. I think, you know, I can't speak to the organization writ large, specifically with regard to wildfire operations. There's a whole lot of reckoning going on right now as to what practices that we changed should become permanent, what should be done away with, and what should we revert to. You know, right now, this past season, we had a lot of hub and spoke models where we had people dispersed around so they weren't congregating all in one place. That presented logistical challenges, but it made them spend less time driving, spend less time at briefings. They got more sleep. They were closer to the area of activity. They're reporting that they feel more well-rested and less sick than they have in years of fire season. So there's a big push there. What that's going to require is increased use of telecommunications, especially for briefings and getting them aware of what's going on. Another thing that I think is going to be a persistent change is we saw more demand for these analytics this fire season by significant, maybe not an order of magnitude, but close to it relative to years in the past. And that was delivered virtually. So I think you're going to see all of these functions that typically are all congregated in one place: finance, logistics, communications, fire modeling. A lot of that can be done virtually. So there's going to be more interest in these analytics while we can actually create kind of centers of excellence where people can be collaborating and working more synergistically instead of having to be driving and flying all over the country.
Yeah, and you just reminded me, we're starting a drone group in 2021, which I think is fascinating. The possibilities are endless, and it definitely affects the Forest Service and USDA. They're going to be like prime possible consumers of that technology. So, and Andy, I'm going to give you the last word. We went a little over time. Sorry about that, but I couldn't stop this conversation. Yeah, well, I called an audible at the line. We're using a lot of sports analogies.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Andy.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. Yeah, just for me, I think as much as, you know, COVID and the pandemic has been a public health challenge, it really has uncovered that it's a data challenge. And it's really put a focus, and I think as Cynthia said, analytic agility, right? It's a crash course in being agile with your analytics capabilities, and being able to automate a lot of the key process, the mundane process around getting access to data and cleaning up that data and making it available for analysis. Because it's not the analysis that was needed in this pandemic and is going to be continue to be needed going forward. It's really going to be the actionable insights that are going to really drive the activity and drive the ability to respond to specific needs, whatever they may be. And I think, the bright side of the cloud, so to speak, that is COVID-19, is that it forced a lot of government agencies to really look at their analytic capability and address things from a data challenge perspective. And I think that's a good thing overall.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Lou, Cynthia, Matthew, and Andy. This has been I've enjoyed this discussion quite a bit, and we will continue it. Just want to let everybody know we've got an event next week talking about trusted internet connection. I know we were talking about doing remote computing, and this is a big part of it. And we're going to be talking about zero trust, and we've got a really fantastic panel ready for you. And we will be delivering all the presentations, or at least most of them. So we'll get you out a package of some of the things that you saw today. And for those of the USDA, you've got your government-only event tomorrow, and we'll see you at that. And thanks everybody, and everybody have a good week.
Thank you.